Anybody in the UK who's been following the media, be that TV, radio or print, or even on billboards, couldn't have missed one of the most widely publicised claims made by the UK government and its scientific advisors about COVID-19, that 1 in 3 people who have the virus have no symptoms and therefore could be spreading the virus without knowing it. A couple of important points of clarification. The claim that 1 in 3 people who have the virus have no symptoms is not the same as the claim that 1 in 3 people who have no symptoms have the virus, any more than all cows are 4-legged animals is the same as all 4-legged animals are cows. Now, the government messaging may have played on the fact that it's known that many people assume these statements are equivalent. It's called the transposed conditional fallacy. Since most people don't have symptoms, the second one would imply that a third of us has the virus, and of course that would be much more worrying. We'll actually show that it's only about 1 in 5,000 people who have no symptoms have the virus. But it's also important to note that the statement is not the same as 1 in 3 people who test positive for the virus have no symptoms. Because, as we'll see, the big issue is that many people testing positive on a single PCR test are false positives. Now, interestingly, this statement is likely to be approximately true, whereas the critical claim that we're focusing on is not true. Using data from a study of people without symptoms, we call asymptomatic people, from Cambridge University, we can show that both that 1 in 3 claim and also the government's Office for National Statistics claim about the infection rate are exaggerated. And we've written a full paper about this, and you'll find the link in the video description. I'm going to give you a brief summary and explanation here. So the Cambridge study uses PCR tests on asymptomatic people, and a person is classified as having the virus if an initial positive test is confirmed in a follow-up test. Now, their data shows that during a period when the Office for National Statistics was estimated infection rates of about 0.71% on average, only 1 in 4,867 people with no symptoms had the virus at any time. But what does that tell us about how many people with the virus had no symptoms? What it does tell us is the following 2 conclusions. Conclusion 1, if the ONS reported infection rate of 0.71% is correct, then at most 2.9%, that's 1 in 34 of people with the virus have no symptoms, and not 1 in 3 as claimed. So the informal explanation for that goes as follows. The population of Cambridge is about 129,000. So since only 1 in 4,867 asymptomatics have the virus, the maximum possible number of asymptomatics with the virus is about 27. If the ONS claimed infection rate is correct, then 0.71% of people in Cambridge would have the virus. Well, that's about 916 people. Hence, at most 27 out of 916 with the virus had no symptoms. And that's a maximum of 2.9%, 27 over 916, i.e. 1 in 34. But on the other hand, we get to conclusion 2. If the government claim that 1 in 3 people with the virus has no symptoms is correct, then the ONS reported infection rate must be massively exaggerated. It must be at most 0.062% instead of 0.71%. And that would mean that that reported rate of 0.71% is at least 11 times greater than the true infection rate. Here's an informal explanation of that. So we already noted that in Cambridge, the maximum number of asymptomatics with the virus would be about 27. But if 1 in 3 people with the virus have no symptoms, then the maximum total number of people with the virus is 3 times that number, i.e. 81. And that means a maximum of 81 out of 129,000 have the virus. And so the maximum infection rate, which is consistent with the government's 1 in 3 claim, is 0.06%. That's 81 over 129,000. So the government's 1 in 3 claim and the Office for National Statistics infection rate claim can't both be true simultaneously. If the government and ONS claims are mutually incompatible, then what's the explanation for this incompatibility? And what's the likely true virus infection rate and the true rate of people with the virus who are asymptomatics. The explanation lies in the impact of false positives. Unlike in the Cambridge study, the government assumes that a person who tests positive in a single PCR test has the virus. They're very unlikely to be subject to confirmatory testing. However, we also know from the Cambridge study that about 3 to 4 in every 1,000 people without symptoms will falsely test positive. And taking this and all other observed data into account, in the paper we show that the true infection rate for the period in question was likely to be 0.379%. And on the other hand, the percentage of people with the virus but no symptoms was most likely to be about 5%. So there's no reasonable scenario in which more than 1 in 18 people with COVID had no symptoms. So we can conclude the government 1 in 3 claim overestimates the percentage of people with COVID-19 who have no symptoms by at least 560%. And the government's estimate of the infection rate, 0.71%, is exaggerated by at least 80%. Now, while the focus of our study was on just one UK city, there's reason to believe that results apply generally throughout the UK, and therefore it's reasonable to conclude that the virus case numbers have been systematically exaggerated. It's also reasonable to conclude that the mass testing of asymptomatic people who've not been in recent contact with a person confirmed as having the virus may be causing unnecessary anguish for minimal benefit at a very high societal and economic cost.